Hello and welcome everyone, and a happy new year. So, it's time for our next episode, and I tell you something. I'm a big science fiction fan since I'm a very little girl. Actually, I had no idea that this is called science fiction. I was just fascinated by the fact that what I saw was far more interesting than the boring reality I was born into. So, I wanna read and see more and more and more of that. This is why I'm still a science fiction fan. In the 1980s, I grew up with Star Trek The Next Generation. And especially, I was totally fascinated by the superhuman beings of the series. One and for all, Q continue. I was a big fan of John Delancey. And I really thought that I have to get the most of it out and I get to know these supernatural characters. I really thought that Q was one of these marvelous brats who can do like everything and he never ever get punished. He just popped up out of nowhere and made his marvelous pranks with the crew of the Enterprise. What I really love most that he was playing around with them like very delicate toys. I thought there must be something in our own reality that is a bit similar to these superhuman beings. Actually, I couldn't distinguish between fiction and reality. And to be honest, it's not important. Because you never know if this reality is also a dream. So I was searching for more of that supernatural stuff. And over the decades, I stumbled upon a lot of interesting things, especially interesting books. And one of my absolute favorites of all time is a classic writer. It's Olaf Stapledon. Surprise, surprise. A very old one, actually, born in the 19th century. He wrote two very famous books you might know. The first one is Star Maker, and the other one is Last and First Men. But I like to talk about Odd John this time. Odd John was written in 1935. What I really like on Stapledon's work is this cosmic scale he's writing at. He writes over, for example, in Star Maker, he writes over 100 billion years. He describes the entire development of stars and planets and the evolution of species that are nearly like us. And he's always this watcher from above in a kind of disembodied being flying all over the sky or the planets and the universe. And for me, that was really, I guess that was really avant-gardistic for that time. I have nothing comparable. I found nothing comparable. So if you have an idea for something comparable, then please let me know. But let's talk about Odd John. At the time, it was between the 1930s and the 1940s. The topic of the Übermensch was very fashionable and fancy. I think it was driven by Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, with his work Also sprach Zarathustra. And there were a lot of authors running around this topic of the superhuman being. So Odd John is another variability of this work. Actually, it's not really a Superman book. I think it's more an underdog Superman book because Odd John, named John Wainwright, is born into a real family, but he is not a human being. He is something different. He's born after 11 months, and at that time he is alive, but he's not talking. He has just these huge eyes observing everything. He's just watching all around and lying in his cradle and in his bed, and years and years and years. After 5 years, he decides to speak. He decides it. He's not very impressed by his environment or by his parents. He always decides what he's doing by himself. That makes him really interesting. And after that, he just decides to read everything he can see, everything that he gets into his hand. That's medical journals and mathematics and natural science. And after this period, he thinks about using his body because he was just lying around. And with 6 years, the first time ever, he starts to walk. Because this brilliant mind was just using this brilliant mind and not the skeleton it was into. He had no connection to his body. He was just a kind of flesh wobbling around. And with 6 years, he decided that he has to do something with his body because otherwise he can't walk, can't go outside. So he studies jiu-jitsu and some athletic stuff, and he goes on travel because he has to get to know his human species, his humankind. He jumps into several trains and get acknowledged with his environment. And it's a very, very active phase for him, actually. This is also the phase where he get engaged in a lot of burglary and struggles just because of the thrill of it. He likes to feel this emotion, how it is to do some criminal stuff. I really like this passage of the book because it's just weird. It's like super weird. And after this period, there's one thing I have to tell you. He's at that time, when he's a younger teenager, he's a notorious inventor as well. So he has this laboratory around the house where he's inventing some very practical household stuff and things for his mother, for his parents, but also very new developments and very new gadgets that he's selling on the market. And he gets a little fortune out of that. He's very experimental with everything he's doing. And he's a self-taught being. That makes him, for me, really, really fascinating. He's a kind of autodidact. And after all of this, he tried to get in more and more adventures, especially in relationship terms. He likes to get the people better. He likes to get to know them better and better. And he has these really, really unhealthy relationships, especially with his mother. It's an incest relationship that makes the book really weird, actually. After this, all of this unhealthy getting to know each other things, he decides to clean his mind and to get a bit more healthy because he's so crazy and he's struggling with himself. And he decides to go in the Scottish Highlands in a cavern and lives there for a time as a hermit. And this is the time, I think the most interesting time of the book, where he develops his telepathic abilities. And he sees that he has a lot of deep into his mind. There's a lot of capacity for telepathic communication. And this is the time where he gets this longing to his own species, to people who are like him. And he tries to make contact telepathically with beings like him. And actually, it works. He stumbled upon two humanoids, two people. The first one is actually a lunatic in a kind of asylum, and he can't make a good contact with him because he's mentally ill. And the second one, and this was something that totally blowed my mind of, was a connection he made within the 15th century. So his capabilities to talk telepathically are also longing into the past. He can read and talk with people in the past. And this is where he connected an Egyptian called Adlan. And he tells him about his idea developing a kind of colony for the superhuman beings, a kind of utopia. And after a certain time, he gets about 12, like a dozen of people for his utopian together. And he wants to create an island in the Pacific Ocean with all the supernatural characters and the beings he found. And when he has these dozens of people together, he collects them all with his yacht and with his airplane, because he also built a yacht and an airplane, and brings these supernatural character with these superhuman abilities to this island. And he's very proud of that. Their cosmic abilities are growing very rapidly, and they have a really cool mindset. They even can fuse atom kernels with their just mental telepathic abilities, and they can fly and they can talk together only telepathically, and they can do a lot of real creepy stuff. And actually, humankind never trusted them. This is the real unlucky story behind. they hunted them, they searched for them, and they find him on the island, and they totally blow up the entire island. The end is a bit strange, because I think that the matter of fact that a lot of human beings that are superhuman beings, they have the capability to transfer and develop time, matter, and space. So I think that they're not really blown up by the humankind. I think they are transformed into something different, because the end of this story is in a way open. It just gets a huge blast. There's a huge blast, and you never know what's really happening. So for my part, I really wish that's a lucky ending and they could escape in a way on an atomic, who knows that, on an atomic level. The very special thing that I thought on Oddjohn is this idea of the superhuman being as a kind of evolutionary state. Olaf Stapledon always thought that Homo sapiens is not the end, that there must be an evolution, that there must be something more inventive after the Homo sapiens. And what is also making the entire story really interesting is that Oddjohn has never ever any interest in mankind. He just wants to develop himself. He just wants to be something better. And this is the way, and this is the kind of search through the entire novel to develop a colony of his own kind. I think this is very bright and very intelligent. So I'm totally a fan of Olaf Stapledon. You can read nearly everything of him, and I wish you the best of luck.